And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to GeekWatch, a subsidiary of the Monastery, the open bar of the internet. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have two of my good brothers here in the temple. We have the man guiding you through all your VTubers under a pair of sunglasses, good brother Shades, and we have the man of 1,000 runes, the CEO of Zadare Enterprises, and the bane of my fucking existence, good brother Xanatrix.
I've recently been having my existence baned by other people.
It's weird.
Well, when you're CEO, you gotta piss off somebody.
Fair enough, but he's still a better CEO than Zaya.
Low bar.
High bar to cross.
However, I will give myself a higher bar. I'm also a better CEO than God Kuroto Dan.
Ooh, now that might be an argument. That might be a debate.
Well, I'm alive.
That is true. You're not a living virus.
Fair.
And how appropriate that we're talking about Toku and executives, because, well, those two things are going to intersect this week. This is one that I've had in the back burner for a while, and it's finally time for it to get its due. Originally I was going to be dunking on it, but since this is someone who has had both good and bad in terms of his actions over the last few years, I had to readjust how I was going to approach this. But every hero needs a villain. And for a lot of Toku fans, there is one name in particular that most definitely counts as the villain. Because on the chopping block tonight is Shinichiro Shirakura, or as we like to call him, Tokusatsu's Jekyll and Hyde.
The Mad Manager himself!
Yes. Oh, do I have a lot to say on this one tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Strap yourselves in. We're going for a ride.
So, I think I think one thing that we should set the stage on is of course who the hell he is. Now, obviously, for a lot of Toku fans, they'll know, but it's always important to set the scene.
Yes, if I may, my good monk.
Go right ahead.
So yes, ladies and gentlemen, Shinichiro Shirakura. If you're deep enough in the Toku community, yes, you probably know this name very well. But for those of you who are new to this little fandom of ours, allow me to give you a proper introduction. Shinichiro Shirakura is currently the executive producer over at Toei Studios and handles pretty much most of their Toku-related properties, their superhero time section, if you want to be pedantic. And he has been involved in the Toku world for quite a long time, actually. He started out he did some supplemental production work for Chojin Sensei Jetman for one specific episode. However, his first time in the producer's chair was, of course, a Sentai that I think even most casual fans will at least have heard of, Kyoyu Sentai Zyuranger.
Which I said this on Saturday in the usual call that we do, and I'm probably going to be stepping on some toes with this, but the weird thing is I actually like MMPR more than I do Zyuranger, and it's not this. And I want to make something clear: this is not nostalgia talking. It has to do with the fact that there's certain elements within Zyuranger that I just do not care for, and a lot of people when they actually got the chance to see Zyuranger, didn't either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's honestly, your opinion about Zyuranger over under MMPR is not that uncommon. I mean, hardcore Sentai purists might defend Zyuranger over MMPR, but most people who are a fan of both will probably say that MMPR is somewhat superior, just based on the fact that you give MMPR a little slack, especially Season 1, which was adapted directly from the Sentai, because it was literally the first season of Power Rangers. It was just starting out. They didn't quite have anything established yet. They hadn't found their legs yet. They didn't even know what they were fucking making at that point. Mm-hmm. So to try to say that Zyuranger is superior to something that had just started is almost unfair. And even by then, Zyuranger's story is so nonsensical and so ass backward after the massive franchise-saving success of Jetman that it leaves a lot of hardcore Sentai fans scratching their heads.
There's a word that I use very ironically most of the time, and even then I don't use this word a lot, but I'm going to use it rather unironically. Zyuranger is mid.
Yeah. The thing with Zyuranger was, and this is something you will begin to, when you start to really look at Shinichiro Shirakura's work as a whole, you start to notice a pattern, and it starts as early as Zyuranger, is that he is very focused on childish plots. Not, obviously, yeah, child plots in general are obviously a thing, and Zyuranger is packed full of child-centered plots. But even the plots that don't center around children tend to have a very childish tone to them. They tend to be more kiddie in presentation. Now, do not mistake me. Sentai and Kamen Rider, to a lesser extent, are family-friendly shows. They are meant to be viewed by a younger demographic. No one is arguing that. We are not getting in, the Toku is a kids show. All right, no one's arguing that. But when I say centered at children, I tend to be aiming. Shinichiro Shirakura tends to aim to the younger child audience, borderline preschool sometimes.
I'd like to make a little bit of an adjustment to the terminology we're using here, just because people think, a child show. It's more important to say Super Sentai, Kamen Rider, most tokusatsu in general, maybe barring Garo, are what would be considered all ages. Everyone can watch it. It's meant to aim towards a broad audience, and it has themes that can pull in a broad audience through that demographic. But Shirakura does try to then focus them down to an actual kids show.
Yes, that's a good. I think that's the perfect way to describe it.
If I would use a Western analog for this conundrum, 2 words, Shades: fear her.
I hate that you're right about that. I know exactly. I trust me. That hits the nail on the head, and I hate that it does. Yeah, for those of you who are not Whovians, the episode of Doctor Who known as Fear Her was an episode that was critically panned because it catered to a much younger audience, much like Shinichiro Shirakura tends to do. And the argument that the director of that episode tried to make was that exact thing, that it wasn't meant for us as older audiences. It was meant for younger audiences. Neglecting the very obvious fact that if you make the show properly and appeal correctly to an all ages audience, you don't need to cater to kids because kids will enjoy it anyway. And a lot of the better directors and producers in Kamen Rider have learned this fact. Mm-hmm. Double is a very, very critically lauded show because it catered to an all-ages audience. It had mature themes, but it still showcased it so that a younger audience could still enjoy it.
Gaim, written by the Uro Butcher himself and even carrying some of his themes of killing everyone, also very critically lauded and appealed to children a lot as well. Yeah. Because it's all ages.
This is the kind of stuff we're talking about. But Shirakura, the big problem with Shirakura, and this is something you will see in a lot of his works as we discuss, because he's been a producer for many Rider and Sentai shows. In terms of Kamen Rider, he's done stuff like he was executive producer for shows like Agito, Ryuki, Faiz, Hibiki for half a season. Oh, and we will get to that! Mm-hmm. Kabuto, Den-O, Decade, Amazons, Geo, and even on Sentai. He did, after Zyuranger, he worked on Die Ranger, and he did some advisory work for Q Ranger. He was chief producer for Kyoryuger Brave, the Korean secondary season. And he was the producer for the more recent Kikai Sentai Zenkaiger. But if you really want to see the depths of his work, his handiwork in full display, I cannot speak any more than to say 3 simple words: the Spring Movies.
That is perhaps going to be the biggest mark on his legacy as a producer. Because, well, I think this is as good. I think this is as good a time as any to cover the quality of each. Now I'm going to give you some names, guys. Now I want you to grade them. Obviously, S being the highest tier and F being the lowest tier. None of these are going to get S. I can guarantee.
No, there's spoiler warning right there. Probably not going to happen. Okay. You're going to be lucky if anything gets in the A tier, honestly.
Superhero Tyson.
That one gets a C for me.
I'd give that a solid B-, to be honest. I really enjoyed Superhero Tyson.
Oh. The original was okay. Okay, I'll give it a B- because it had its problems, especially the whole thing with Kaito turning evil for no fucking reason at the last minute.
That was great. I loved that. that was the best.
Oh, my friend, I could just taste the sarcasm dripping from your mouth on that one, sir.
I should hope. I'm an expert connoisseur chef when it comes to sarcasm.
Oh, yeah. I could definitely tell. Yeah, but yeah. A lot of it was actually pretty good, and it was a monumental moment in the history of Toku because of how many suit actors they had in one shot at the same time. Great, would get us world record, awesome. But the storyline was mediocre at best.
Yeah. Superhero Tyson Z.
Tyson Z, I give it. I do remember Z. Tyson Z, I would rate as the highest of the spring movies, and I'd probably give that an A-.
Let me remind myself for a second, because I haven't watched many of the spring movies in a long time.
Z was the one with Gavon.
Okay, yeah, solid A. Fuck yeah, solid A.
It was the best of the spring movies, bar none. Because
Kyoryuger, Wizard, the fucking space sheriffs, hell yeah.
And it had a solid story. If there's any of the Tyson movies that I could go back and rewatch, it would be Z easily.
I also loved the fact that they involved Go Busters so much. That was so fucking good.
They gave Go Busters more credit than the actual series did. I'm not even fucking kidding.
Mm-hmm. It was just sad because Go Busters... I don't care what anybody thinks about Go Busters. You're fucking wrong if you think it's bad. Because, yes, it's sort of kind of a little bit paying homage to Power Rangers with the Let's Morphin thing. But, that was actually fun and cool.
And the story was actually really good. So, yeah. But anyway, getting back on topic before we go too far off the rails here. But, yeah, the fact that Yoko was such a central character to everything was a really solid way to handle it. And, yeah, easily the best of the movies.
Mm-hmm. We go from the best from one of the worst in my opinion, but I'm not the one judging it in this instance. Heisei versus Showa, Kamen Rider Tyson.
F! F! Fucking F!
I don't remember this movie at all.
Oh!
I don't remember this movie at all. Such a movie exists? I've never heard of it.
All right, all joking aside, yeah, F. Fucking F. And here's why. More than anything else, and there was a lot of shit. The revival of freaking Kaiza and retconning his entire story for the sake of a cheap guilt trip for freaking Fies. But the biggest sin that this movie committed was the big scene near the end when they turned the Showa-era Kamen Riders into villains. Not in story. The story-wise, they were still technically supposed to be heroes, but in their actions, in their comments, the things they said to the Heisei Riders in that moment, where they claimed that the fact that the Heisei Riders were quote-unquote hanging on to the dead, and that their actions are what caused the whole events of the movie, that then turned them into villains because they were going against the very thing that they were based around.
And the thing that provides the face turn is a fucking flower.
Yeah. It just everything about that moment, that movie, just pisses me the fuck off. I cannot watch that movie without feeling intense amounts of rage, and I know I'm not fucking alone. Hi, Deshinta, how the fuck you doing?
So, do you want to know how bad that ending was? They cut out the flower as an alternate ending.
Yeah. It wasn't an alternate ending. The original, the plan, the thing that happened with the Kamen Rider Tyson was that the ending was decided by fan vote. They made two separate endings, and based on whether the Heisei or the Showa era won. Spoiler warning: it doesn't fucking matter. It pretty much ends the same anyway. It's just whether or not Gaim surrenders or Ichigo surrenders. But
Gaim surrenders is honestly the better one, to be honest.
Yeah,
because the way that one concludes. Gaim's pulling up for, his rider, whether he's going to kick or punch or whatever, his rider final attack, but stops because Ichigo could have gotten him. And he's like, okay, yeah, you could have got me. We're done. And Ichigo's like, hey, yeah, thanks. And stuff. Yeah. It's better than, you protected a flower, oh my god, we're good again.
Yeah, it just let's be honest, both endings sucked. Mm-hmm. All right, both endings were shit.
Hey, if it had the alternate ending instead of an F, it'd be an F+.
No, to me it wasn't.
It'd still be shit. It'd just be shit that's easier to pass than constipation or diarrhea.
Do I need to bring up the whole pigeon and a blue jay story?
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
you don't.
Exactly. But again, regardless of that fact, that movie is absolutely... It is the worst Kamen Rider movie in existence. Prove me wrong.
Oh, I'm not trying to prove you wrong.
I know you won't. You're on my side on that one, bitch.
I'm on your side, but I ain't anybody's bitch. Don't you call me bitch again? I'll call you bitch, bitch.
Yeah. But
Gonna have a full on nigga moment as per Boondocks.
I have an exorcist on speed dial just in case.
Do you?
But next, Tyson GP.
This one's kind of, I guess it's mid for me. Like
C-, I'd say. It had some good moments here and there, and the storyline was okay. Though there were a couple scenes that did piss me off. I'd say Kiriko's suicide scene was not necessary. It was just simply there for shock value and didn't contribute to anything. When the web movie does a better suicide scene than fucking GP does, you know you got problems.
Yeah. Really, what carried it is the characters.
Yeah,
and
I think
the story.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say that the stories, the actual story is kind of lacking without the characters dragging it along.
Yeah, the fact that because Shinosuke's actor had to go off to film the series and he literally was persona non grata for like half the movie and just shows up at the end kind of hurt it a little bit. But stuff like Sakurai's involvement and why he was checking things out, the story with Faiz was actually pretty decent. Hell, I'd say Go's death was actually handled rather well, all things considered, especially because it led into the web movies to help fix everything. I'd say that a lot of those aspects weren't half bad. I think the whole, the time manipulation. I mean, come on, how many times have they done that fucking trope?
I mean, they have an entire series about it.
Exactly. So, yeah. But there are some good, but there are some bad. It was an okay movie. It wasn't unbearably bad.
Yeah, it is really all I can say.
Yeah.
So this technically is not a this technically is not a big crossover in that sense, but I do have to ask about Kamen Rider 1.
Oh, you mean the Ichigo, the new Ichigo suit from Ghost, I think?
No, the Kamen Rider 1 film that was released in 2016, I think he's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The one where Hiroshi Fujioka helped write it.
Oh, I don't think I've seen that one. Or have I?
I have seen it. And what I can say is it is definitely a love letter to Takeshi Hongo, to Kamen Rider Ichigo, to Hiroshi Fujioka himself.
Oh no! I was looking. Yeah, that was the Kamen Rider. Yeah, that was the one that crossed over with Ghost.
I believe so. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, that one. It was okay, but there is one significant problem with it that really pissed me off. Is that the villain faction, the space, or what was it?
Shocker Nova Shocker Nova Corporation Limited.
Yeah, it was Foundation X. There's no getting around it. It was Foundation X.
Mm-hmm.
They literally took the best thing of the early of the Phase 2 Heisei era, at least before that point, and just turned them and just made it a Shocker branch that was exactly them. And badly done. I'm sorry. I will not Foundation X was so much better.
And missed the point of why Riku Sanjo came up with the whole concept of Foundation X.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was dumb.
And I do want to correct, it was co-written by Fujioka. The other half of the equation was Inoue.
Inoue, yeah.
Who
Toshiki Inoue.
Yeah, we've talked about in the past.
Yeah.
Next on the list is Cho Superhero Tyson.
I'd say
Superhero Tyson.
Yeah, I know, right?
Either that or Butterfly Superhero Tyson.
I'd say maybe D+. I mean, it wasn't really. It was there and not very good. It was just kind of a generic crossover movie.
I'm going to give it F+ because it does such a disservice to X-Aid. It was just kind of there, and X-Aid was so exciting. There was so much more they could have done. In fact, they could have just kind of excluded Q-Ranger entirely and focused on X-Aid.
Yeah, I don't think it was like the only reason I don't give it an F in any regard is that it didn't outright infuriate me to that regard.
It infuriated the misuse of X-Aid for me. Yeah, so that's why I'm giving it an F+.
I can see your point. I'm not saying you're wrong there. I know, this is an opinion thing. But I think the reason why it didn't infuriate me, the reason why I don't hold it to the same level of disdain that I do Kamen Rider Tyson is that even if it did infuriate X-Aid, that did misuse X-Aid, it really only truly misfused that one writer. And even then, I've seen worse. Kamen Rider Tyson was infuriating to me because it mishandled the entire franchise and the entire point of the franchise. So to me, it's at least that tiny minuscule bit better.
I can see your point. That's why I gave it only an F+ and not just a full-on F, because
again, that's semantics at that point. It's a matter of a taste and opinion on that one. So no hate there. We're pretty much agreeing that it was a bad movie. That's
yes. It's just how much we hated it.
Exactly. And again, X-Aid was redeemed because of the web movie, which even though that was more in service of Blade than it was for X-Aid, it still treated X-Aid pretty good.
Yeah. Now, lastly, and this is I know what's coming, but I got to get it out of the system. Generations Forever.
Generations Forever. In all honesty, like critically speaking, I'm probably gonna give it, say, a C-. It was okay. The story was decent. Had some epic moments. Personally speaking, though, I'd like to give it a D- because, quite frankly, he fucked over my boy Double.
Look how they massacred my boy.
Yeah, this is a classic case of their reach stretching beyond their grasp.
Yeah.
A case of eyes bigger than stomach, whichever proverb you want to use here. I wanted to like it. I really did.
We all did, because the Heisei generation movies up until that point were actually really good. All of them. In fact, the one before it was Final, was actually solid. It was probably one of the best ones they had done in a while. It was great story, good use of the cast. Everyone got the respect. It was really good.
Yes, it was really good, and it got my boy Build in there with X-Aid, and it was just so much fucking fun.
Exactly. I loved fucking Final. But Forever just kind of felt like a slightly better spring movie is really what it was. And I just didn't care for it. And it tried. It really tried. But when Overquartzer does a better job with the crossover stuff, with that epic reveal at the end of all of the writers, including all of these one-off writers that most of us had never even heard of before.
Even didn't that also use the fucking manga version of Kuga?
Yes, that one. Yes, that was
great.
It had manga Kuga. It had what's his name from Gaim? Zangetsu Kachidoki, and they even had a cameo from Kamen Rider in it, which was
that was great.
Yeah, And which is ironic because it was Kamen Rider that ruined the reputation of Kamen Rider in Japan to begin with. It's the whole reason why people look on the Showa era so badly.
And we'll get into that
it even had Kamen Rider G in it. Mm-hmm. Who the fuck thought we'd ever see Kamen Rider G again? Fucking.
It was. And so in comparison, Forever is kind of. It's there. I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah. That's why I say C- critically, because it was okay, but the storyline was decent, but everything else about it was real. Had some epic moments, but yeah, also negative points for fucking over Double like that. Because for those who have not seen Geo, Double's another rider did not have a human form. Every other rider had a human form connected to it, had a storyline behind why they became another rider. Double did not.
Yep.
And yet they put another Deno in there twice because he was in the movie and he was in the series.
Yep. It was bad. I'll agree with C- on that one.
Yeah. No. That's why, to me, I think it was just it ruined and that's why it ended up being the last of the Heisei Generations movies. Even though, that and the fact that after this it wouldn't be the Heisei generation anymore.
Now they're all collectively called the Generations series, and the Reiwa and Beyond generations, Reiwa the first generation and Beyond generations are considered part of the series.
Considered part of the series, but those are better and guess whose name isn't in the credits on those?
I can't imagine whose name isn't in the credits. Monk, tell me.
Oh, yeah, right? Yeah. Who could it be?
Yeah.
Who could possibly be missing? I can't understand.
Now, it's worth note since we brought up Kamen Rider, it's worth noting that because of that particular parody, treating Kamen Rider like a joke to the point where nobody was taking that character seriously. It's believed that that's the reason why the 90s trilogy of movies took such a dark turn.
To try and make it serious business.
Yeah, people had such a bad reputation with Kamen Rider that Shotari Shinomori was like, okay, you guys want a darker Kamen Rider? You want a serious Kamen Rider? Okay, here's Kamen Rider Shin.
Not to be confused with Shin Kamen Rider by Hideaki Anno.
Yeah, there's a reason I put the shit at the end now, because we have to make that distinction. Thanks a lot there, Anno!
Hey, Anno's Shin Kamen Rider is shaping up to be pretty fucking good, so...
Oh, it is, but it also means now we have to make the distinction that there is Shin Kamen Rider, a.k.a. New Kamen Rider, and then we have Kamen Rider Shin, a.k.a. Gory Kamen Rider.
Didn't we also cover this problem with Ultraman?
Shin Ultraman, yeah.
Yeah. And Smaxo had made a joke about it. Using all three of the Shin projects.
Yeah. Now, Zeltrax in the chat, we've been talking about a lot of the negatives of Shirakura, but I think we do need to acknowledge the more recent actions of Shirakura and why the whole Jekyll and Hyde thing has now become a thing, and why we had to kind of pivot our discussion on this, because in the last few years, Shinichiro Shirakura has actually shown a side of himself that makes us go, okay, maybe he's not quite the asshole we all thought he was, because up until, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, a lot of us basically equated him to Vince McMahon, a.k.a. Junior, they like to call him over in the Fed, a.k.a. WWE, to the point we were literally calling him Mr. Shirakura. However, we've started to realize that Shirakura does at least have some business sense, because Shinichiro Shirakura has actually been trying his damnedest to bring Kamen Rider to the West for all of us. This happened when he did a Q&A on Twitter. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Shinichiro Shirakura has a Twitter. God help us all.
I mean, most influential studio people have Twitters these days.
That's true, but it's still weird for a guy like Shirakura, as old as he is, and how long he's been in the business to have a Twitter. It still fascinates me. But he did a Q&A on Twitter, and somebody brought up to him the idea of bringing Kamen Rider to the West. Now, originally, he said that at the time, Toei and he and Toei had no plans to bring Kamen Rider stateside because, as far as they were concerned, there wasn't enough interest in the West. Or so he thought.
Which is odd because if that was the case, why was that Power Rider trademark being filed?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of people. I get the feeling that they thought they were worth looking into it, but given the success, given the quote unquote success, if you will, of shows like Master Rider in the '90s and Kamen Rider Dragon Knight in the 2000s. They might have felt that maybe there wasn't an interest in Kamen Rider, not realizing that the problem with those shows is that the former was absolute shit, and the latter was completely mishandled. Fuck you, 4Kids. So they didn't realize that, no, there was an interest for Kamen Rider. It's just we hadn't gotten a good look at Kamen Rider here in the West. But as in the last 10 or so years, more and more people have been starting to become aware of Kamen Rider. I mean, as far back as 2010, I had started becoming interested in Kamen Rider thanks to my buddy Easy. Fan subs were starting to grow, and more people were becoming aware of it and buying the merchandise. And thus, the fan base was big enough then, at the time of this Q&A, that basically when he made that comment, the U.S. fans made their voices heard. Mm-hmm. They spoke out in droves saying, what the fuck are you talking about? There's a lot of us over here. Have you not seen? Like, we've got cosplayers, we've got fan works, we've bought merchandise. There's an interest over here. And to his credit, he listened.
Yep. He does try to make money for Toei. And once he was made aware of the fact that there is quite the audience, because the optics weren't there for him because he probably doesn't involve himself on the fan side a lot of the time.
Yeah.
He's more official than that. And so when all the fans are like, yo, gigantic place to sell stuff here, he's like, we should capitalize on that.
So he basically said, let me work on that. And true to his word, within a year's time, we started seeing more and more collaborations announcements. Stuff like Shout Factory started releasing stuff. We started seeing the Shout Factory DVDs for Super Sentai start to come out in small bits. And then we also saw collaborations with companies like Bluefin Productions to release a lot of the merchandise. Mm-hmm. So more and more, it started to build. And stuff like Tokusatsu started coming out. And then we're like, okay, now we're getting somewhere. Now, here's where the problem lies. And this actually is not Shirakura's fault, as we have recently learned. Because a lot of fans have complained that, well, as of right now, the release of Kamen Rider in the West has been spotty at best.
We talked about this in the Ultraman episode.
Yep, about how Tsuburaya is releasing over here in the West way better than Toei is.
Yes. Now, once again, Shirakura has taken to Twitter to basically say, but guys in the West, I'm sorry. I'm trying my best here. He's basically outright said that it's not his fault that Kamen Rider's release in the West has been as bad as it is because he has been trying to make it happen. But it seems upper management Toei has basically put the kibosh on it.
Or either put the kibosh or just really drag their feet on the matter.
I'd say that's a better analogy.
Toei tends to drag their feet on fucking everything.
Don't I fucking know it as an anime fan, fucking Christ. As the anime guy in the room, there's a reason why I stopped doing anime reviews, and one of those is that Toei Productions in all of its forms are asshats. Mm-hmm. I got three words for you. Totally not Mark.
Yeah, but what I'm specifically referring to in this case is the fact that the Western release has been very bizarre. In terms of what seasons are out, even over the course of a few years, and what seasons are translated on their official YouTube page. For the most part, it's just been the first couple episodes of a bunch of Heisei series. I think
what they've done is they've released
series.
Not just every Heisei. They have actually done the Showa era too. They've done the first two episodes of every single Kamen Rider series: Heisei, Showa, and Reiwa. I think the only thing they haven't released are the first 2 episodes of Revice, which
Since it's currently airing.
it's still currently airing. So that's the only things they haven't released yet. But everything from Ichigo to Saber has been released. The problem is that the full releases, we've got Ichigo, Kuga, and 01, and eventually, I think Ryuki, if it hasn't already come out yet, Ryuki. That's it! Oh, no, wait, Agito. Agito's out there as well.
Yeah, and this is why I wanted to contrast this particular thing with what Subarai has been doing, where they've gone out of their way to not only try and release a lot of the backlog stateside, but also do official subs of current series on their YouTube page.
Yeah, in fact, those of you who watch Tokuris Live over on my channel will know that we've actually been watching Ultraman Z, the second to last season that's come out. We've been watching that on the official Ultraman YouTube channel with their subs. So they've been actually doing a really good job in allowing us to keep up with everything. But Kamen Rider has not been so fortunate on that regard. But apparently that's Toei, not specifically Shirakura. He's at least been trying.
Yeah, he's been trying. Now that being said, although he has done a significant amount of work to try and repair his reputation, there is still the fact that there is a lot of shit in the yard, especially given the long list of people he's pissed off in Japan.
Oh yeah. There's a reason why a lot of the Phase 1 Heisei writers are a lot harder to get back when it comes to reoccurring actors.
Mm-hmm. There's a few of them I know he pissed off so much they don't want to work with him anymore.
Yeah, I think if you want a good example of just how bad he's pissed people off, the number one example would have to be Hibiki.
Yeah, let's talk about the Hibiki incident, and especially what happened midway through.
Yeah, Hibiki was an oddity in and of itself to begin with, because it wasn't originally meant to be a Kamen Rider story. It was one of the last stories that Shotaro Ishinomori had penned before his death that was never released. And it was retooled into a Kamen Rider series to follow up after, I believe it was Blade. Yeah, Blade.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it came up after Blade. So, and because of how odd it was and how it was very different from every other Kamen Rider series, a lot of fans were confused by it. I mean, it had a much more of a musical motif to it. The weapons were all musical based, and they didn't henshin the same way. They didn't even say henshin. They literally just tapped or plucked a musical instrument on themselves and held it up to their heads to transform.
There's also the fact that it had more of a monster mystery like a lot of Ishinomori's early work, or even more akin to Mononoke.
Yeah. So a lot of fans were confused and, needless to say, turned off by it. So around the time of episode 30, Shirakura stepped in. They basically removed the original team of Hibiki and replaced it with Toshiki Inoue. And according to Zeltrax, it wasn't even really his fault there either, but he still did the damage. It was a case of they forced Shirakura to take over, but it's still technically his fault what happened afterwards. Because,
there were a lot of factors. There was also the whole thing with apparently the good old PTA was complaining about some of the monster designs and about them either being too scary or opening their mouths too wide, which is a very weird thing to complain about.
Parent groups complain about everything. It's why I'm the that's why I'm the anti-parent group.
There was also the fact that Hibiki's actor had mentioned that after the staff change happened, up until that point he was in a lot of the writing meetings, Like he was hands-on with the development. After the staff change, he wasn't allowed in the writers' room, according to him. And I think he had said something to the extent of afterwards that he wanted to continue his idea.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing what he said. There was also the fact that now, according to rumors, one of the original plans was for both of the kids we had at the end to become Oni, instead of one of them who would end up being a much better character a few seasons later, and his Oni design was a kit bash of the two designs that were originally going to be used.
Yeah. There was a lot of issues there, but regardless of that, the thing that really shows the difference is simply the reason why I use this particular form of Hibiki in the splash screen, Hibiki armed form. This is when it stopped being a unique series and tried to be a standard Kamen Rider series, because up until that point, all the Oni's weapons were musical instruments. You had drumsticks, you had horn, you had air bugles, you had fucking guitars. Arm forms shows up and it's a fucking dagger that just happened to have a horn-like thing attached to, or a microphone attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see you in the chat. Get your ass in here, Doku.
And I will admit I do have a soft spot for the Hibiki movie, if only because it's a blatant nod to the Seven Samurai.
Oh, absolutely! The Hibiki movie is a good movie, but it's strictly arm, and even then, arm form was given a little more respect there, honestly. But the arm form in the main series was honestly just a mess. Like taking all of the arms monsters and just having them fuse onto his body, including a whole bunch we'd never seen before. Just like, the fuck?
And I was like, who is Doku?
But that was the moment I think anyone realized this is no longer Hibiki, this is a Kamen Rider series. This is just your base form Kamen Rider series, and that's when you started to... And it got so bad that the original actor for Hibiki, I believe he walked off the set at the finale.
Mm-hmm. But also, and YGM is saying that it had a better ending to the series than the actual ending, except the Hibiki movie is a prequel.
That's the sad part about it.
So...
No, if you want to... We actually have to talk about another series. If we want to talk about a series where the Min movie was a better ending than the actual ending. And that's a series that we've talked about on this show before.
Yep, I'm guessing you're leaning into Ryuki.
No! Though, let us talk about Ryuki first. Because...
I have to bring up the story.
I said that was what I was going to do. All right, I was going to talk about the story of Ryuki. I know what you're getting at.
Yeah. I'll let you take point.
So, after Agito, Shirakura had actually planned to end Kamen Rider for good. He thought it was done.
I think his reasoning was they had done a throwback with all of the big three, so why continue it?
Yeah, but then Bandai, I think it was Bandai who stepped in.
No, it was TV Asahi.
Oh, TV Asahi. Okay, I was mistaken there. But TV Asahi steps in and says, no, we want more. This shit's popular. We're making money off this shit. What the fuck are you doing?
The other thing was they had felt shortly after the 9/11 attacks. They had sent in a memo saying that it should continue, and the wording was, once again I'm paraphrasing, we have to teach youth about justice.
Yeah, they wanted to do that. So, what does Shirakura decide to do? Give us a story that basically as we have labeled before, was the death of the Showa era Kamen Rider.
And his argument for it was the idea of justice meaning different things to different people. If that's the case, he did a shit job explaining that.
Oh my god. Well, the part of that problem is, as we've mentioned before, is the fact that we had two different producers involved who did not like each other. Because on the one hand, we had Toshiki Inoue, and on the other hand, we had Yasuka Kobayashi.
Oh god.
Will get her turn. Just wait.
We still got her sitting over there in the back burner ready for her time in the spotlight, rest assured.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was a mistake. And yeah, they created a series together that basically was the antithesis of what Kamen Rider has ever been. And it pissed off everybody.
I don't like Game Fan, I don't like the saying that Ryuki inspired Madoka and Gaim. I've had an argument with other people about that before.
I do believe that
Mm-hmm.
Urobuchi uses a lot of the same themes in all of his works.
When it came to the design of the Sengoku driver, I know that Ryuki was flat out name dropped.
Yeah, yes. He has admitted his inspiration from Ryuki, but he never outright said that like everything was based on Ryuki. But
yeah.
There's
small details. There's small details, but the big thing is he uses
only inspiration.
Yeah, the big thing is he uses a lot of the same themes in a lot of his works, but always applies them differently, so you get vastly different shows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I just had to sidetrack for that for a second. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. This is there's a lot. Ryuki was a mess, plain and simple. There was so much going on with that particular season.
Which is why that was our first Kamen Rider reconstruction.
Mm-hmm.
But not our only one. And the other big one we've done is another one where Shinichiro Shirakura had his hand in. Let's talk about the passing through Kamen Rider.
You mean the Kamen Rider who's only better when he's passing through places that aren't his own show?
Right? 2 words, ladies and gentlemen. Onari Dikedo!
Oh yeah, the completely useless man.
Because, yes, Decade was definitely one of those that Shirakura was involved in. And we also have to bring another name up, because we talked about the Spring movies earlier. In all of the Taisen films, there was another name involved. And he was also involved in Decade. Shoji Yonemura. These two seem to be like two peas in a fucking pod.
In the same rotting pod sometimes.
By the way, I have to correct myself. For the longest time, I was waffling back and forth whether or not Amazon.
And there we go.
Is the shortest, and there's Doku.
Late in game, motherfucker.
Like I said, I don't know how much I'm going to be able to contribute to this.
Never underestimate the value of an outside perspective.
I can't disagree with that. Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah. But I had to double check. The original Amazon is still the shortest Kamen Rider series. That had 24 episodes. Decade had 31.
Yes, that is the numbers for you there. And we are not doing. And anyone who does a Steiner math joke can go fuck off.
I'm not drunk enough for that, and neither are you.
Yet.
Exactly.
Doku can't.
Doku might get there.
No, Doku can't get that drunk. He's got too much alcohol tolerance.
Fair. But yeah,
that sounds like a challenge.
Do not drink yourself dead, asshole.
Right? Jesus fuck.
That also sounds like a challenge.
If you do that, I will march into hell just to kick your ass and get my money back.
If you
we don't have refunds here, Mildred. you should know that at this point.
This ain't a refund. This is collecting his back pay.
Yeah, this is the tax man coming to collect his taxes, essentially.
Exactly.
Taxes. What is that?
I'm just saying. I am the type of person who will go. I know you're here, Lucifer. You big fucking nerd. Where's my goddamn money?
Well, you're gonna have to pay at least $50 for one shade of green paint.
Anyway, let's get
Right.
back on topic now that we're all here.
Rails.
Yeah, rails. Now, Shoji Yonemura, when he's not working on Toku, actually can do some decent stuff. He was the main writer for the Parasite anime, and that wasn't actually that bad.
Wasn't he also involved in the Shenmue animation?
I have to double check that, but I think you're right on that.
Yeah, it could
And that was actually pretty good.
The staff.
I mean, it's not hard to get the Parasite anime right when you're following the manga almost shot for shot.
Here's the thing. He did make some changes that actually worked well in his favor, like the fact that he modernized a few things. Like, instead of looking into an encyclopedia, the main character looked online to find out about what he's dealing with. So
but
he added some touches that worked.
Yeah. He added some touches that worked, but otherwise he followed the manga shot for shot.
But when it comes to writing original stuff like a Kamen Rider series, well, his resume speaks for itself.
There's
Again,
also the fact that
movies
where one goes, the other follows.
For the most part. At the very least, if Shoji Yonemura is involved, odds are good Shirakura is right behind him.
Mm-hmm.
And Decade is the prime example of that. It was a mess of a show, as we again have.
We reconstructed that one too.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But this was supposed to be like their pet project. They wanted to basically do this big anniversary season for the 10th anniversary of Heisei Kamen Rider. And it ended up being just an overall look at Kamen Rider as a whole. Because by the second half, they started getting into Showa era shit. And Showa era writers kept popping up, and Shocker got involved. It was just a nightmare.
And Apollo Geist got way too much screen time.
Oh, fucking Christ.
MD Geist, what?
Somehow that almost feels better. Almost.
I don't think it should feel better. I think it should feel just as bad, just in a different way.
Zeltrax makes a correction. No, the person that held the Shenmue anime was another name that Shirakura's worked with, Kento Shimoyama.
I mean, I just want to torture all of you by saying SSS Gridman after world domination.
That ain't torture.
How is that torture?
I was gonna say, how's that torture?
And
from what I've heard, Romance After the World Domination was good, and SSS's Gridman is fucking amazing.
Well, SSS's Gridman is amazing, and Love After World Domination is actually pretty damn good. I'm not gonna deny it.
So yeah, that's not torture. That's a good thing. Fuck
yeah, Love After World Domination is a fantastic anime. I am loving the hell out of it. So you just combine.
I actually want to go watch that one.
Do so, Shades. I highly recommend. But let's again rails.
Mm-hmm. Rails. But yeah, we'll get to Shimoyama in a minute because we do have one other series that Shirakura's got his hand in that we're going to have to talk about, but that comes later. Yep. Let's talk about Decade here for a little bit. We're still on him. Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned earlier, this was the one series where the mid-series movie ended up being a better ending to the series than the actual ending of the series. Because
especially since, as far as an episode basis, the series didn't end.
Yeah. And even if you counted the official ending, which was Movie War 2010, and episode final that they did there, that ending movie was shit.
When Geo does Decade better than Decade did Decade, you know you have a problem.
Exactly, because I will stand to this day that All Riders vs. Die Shocker was the official canon movie ending of Decade. Fuck you, fight me. It was actually a good ending.
Mm-hmm.
I'll back him up. Bring it on.
Yeah, Zan and I don't agree all the time, but when the two of us are on the same page, fuckers, watch out.
Yeah. That being said, when since just a side note, since you brought up Geo, one would think that we would lambast that one, but truth be told, we didn't have as much issue with Geo, which is why it was off the list when it came to reconstructions, because it's not a whole lot that's really worth reconstructing.
Kento Shimoyama, while not exactly a great writer, isn't outright terrible. Like, Geo had its problems. I've made this very clear because I've reviewed and riffed that series to death and back. it had its problems. There were some episodes that were really bad, and ironically, the Hibiki episode was one of them. Holy shit, that was a piece of garbage.
Mm-hmm.
But there was also some really good episodes in Geo that I actually really liked. And in terms of like the anniversary-based episodes, I'd say Blade was one of the better ones. They actually concluded Blade.
I just like the fact that that any time, Decade showed up, he stole the fucking show. Every time. Doesn't matter if he was just there for a few moments. Like, yeah!
The fact that we made a meme out of him with the pistol, that turned out to be a fucking meme for a while in the Toku community of him in the army fatigues holding a fucking pistol going, what you gonna do, bitch?
Yeah.
Just like, that was a thing. And it was glorious. But yeah, the Blade episode was good closure. The Kabuto episode was really good. And the storyline itself was actually pretty solid. And the ending was pretty conclusive. I mean, we got to see Sogo be a badass motherfucker when he finally went Omagio. They made it a big fucking deal. He had finally become good enough friends with Gates that his death ended up basically setting him off and turning him into the very thing Gates had been trying to stop the whole fucking time. But instead of him being the ultimate villain, he was just like, no, now you've just gone, now this another decade has just come and pissed me the fuck off.
So I'm going to take the powers back.
Let's be honest. If you can get close to the level of being a Dio meme, yeah, it doesn't even have to be good at that point in time. You are good by default.
Yeah, and it was handled very well. And Sogo's final decision to just reset everything and basically go, fuck it, I don't want to be a king anymore. That was really well done. I thought they handled that very well.
Mm-hmm. YGM makes a good point. UA! Was glorious. The meme lord, exactly.
There's a reason why we use the EY as our notification.
No!
I stand by my statement.
So yeah, there's a lot of good with Gio. So Kento Shimoyama, I don't hate him as a writer. He's not great, but I don't hate him. I just tolerate him.
Okay, you can tolerate is one thing. I would ask this very simple question: who would you pick otherwise to do what he did? Is there anybody else?
So that's the problem. Obviously I could go honestly. While the obvious answer might be Naruhisa Arakawa, because that guy knows his shit. He knows his shit when it comes to Sentai. I don't know if he would know enough to be able to do the same thing with Kamen Rider.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough.
I think my only issue, well, not my only issue, but one of my biggest issues with Geo is why Gates Majesty? Why Gates?
Don't you mean Gates McDonald's?
Yeah. I see what they were trying to go for. They were trying to create a grand Geo alternative for Gates, but the design of it, no. You know what? Dan, I'm gonna counter you. Gates Majesty was bad. What the fuck was up with Decade Forever 21?
Even Japan was getting 21. In on the memes with that one.
Let's go.
Let's Decade's actor was kind of iffy on the thing.
Of course he was. Let's actually do this. Which jobbed harder, Decade 21 or Thousand Arc?
Decade 21.
You're right, because Thousand Arc at least got a few punches in.
Decade Complete 21. Arc Thousand Arc was at least decent looking. At least it looked badass. It looked like a fucking monster of a form. I haven't seen the movie yet, but I've seen that form. It looks awesome. But Decade Complete 21, to me, without question, is one of the ugliest looking forms of Kamen Rider I've ever fucking seen.
Seeing a fan art of what they thought Decade Complete 21 would look like, it was super awesome. Why didn't Toei just steal that?
Yeah, pay the guy a few $100, take that and run with it. The form we got with the 2 cards on top, the phase 2 Heisei on the chest plate, and all the fucking cards on the cape was the death knell. That to me was like, what the fuck is that?
That cape looked like someone took the plastic binder card holders you use for collectible card games and turned it into a giant sheet. That's all it fucking looked like!
Xana and Shades, I would ask you one simple question. Don't issue challenges like that, because I guarantee you somebody out there will come up with something worse, and they will issue that, or they will take that as a challenge having been issued, and they will find a way to make it worse.
So Toku is saying that he's volunteering to make it worse, as always.
Yeah.
Oh, if I wanted to do that, trust me, I could.
I'm sorry. I got to call this out because I got to say this straight up. If anyone at Toei comes up with a suit design worse than Complete 21, how the fuck does it get past quality control? How does anyone look at anything if you find something worse than Complete 21 and that gets past quality control, someone gets fired over that.
They had quality control?
Also, YGM, I'm not entirely sure why you got to bring Cosmic Forze into this.
Yeah, Cosmic Stakes wasn't the best final form by any means, but it wasn't that bad. I mean,
Cross Saber was worse than Cosmic States because all Cross Saber is a reskin of fucking Saber base form.
Yeah.
So I know I'm going to get a lot of flack for this, and
when does that stop you?
Right?
Never. But you guys remember that there was a second, third, and fourth Starship Troopers movie, right?
I am well aware.
Why does this apply to Shirakura?
I want to remind you. Do you think it can get worse? Because
there's a reason why nobody ever talks about. Here's the thing, though. There's a reason why no one ever talks about those movies because,
I'm just saying, if the challenge has been issued, yes, it can get worse. But let's not go there.
Mm-hmm.
Still, regardless, yeah, the Decade just, the idea behind Decade makes so much sense, but the execution has just been flawed at every single step of the way. Again, if you really want to know how they could have done Decade and made it work, go watch our reconstruction.
Yeah, it's
miles better.
Now, that being said, there is one project that he personally spearheaded and heavily promoted that I think is worth getting into, especially given some of the damage it caused as a bit of a ripple effect. Let's talk about Amazons.
Yeah. Now, fair being fair, Season 1 Amazons was
great.
Actually pretty good. It was written by Yasuko Kobayashi, and whatever you want to say about her, and one day we will.
She actually did well here.
Mm-hmm. She did well. It was legitimately, it had good characters. The storyline was good, had some fun moments. I mean, come on, you gotta love the wife. She was a fucking trip.
Mm-hmm.
And it was legitimately a mature, darker, more serious Kamen Rider series. It reached what it set out to get, was to create a serious, darker Rider. Then Season 2 happened.
Wah, wah.
Season what?
I know, right? Even we've said many a times, go watch Season 1, skip Season 2. Season 2, Kobayashi stepped down from it, and Shirakura was directly involved as the main producer.
Was this around that time that Kobayashi had to deal with was dealing with burnout because she was managing like three different projects in the same?
No,
year?
No, that was around the time of Go Busters.
All right,
but this Amazon's Season 2, he took over, and the difference showed like night and fucking day.
I'm not gonna lie, I actually didn't really mind Amazon Seasons 2, but that's because I didn't pay that much attention to it while I was watching it.
There's no accounting for taste.
It was one of those things you could just sort of put on in the background, and it was entertaining. But as long as you didn't pay attention to it, it was fine.
Exactly.
I cannot accept that argument.
Nope. Can't stand for that. The fact that it was such a downgrade. If you were a fan of season 1 and season 2 disappoints you that much, you fucked up.
Which
season one was great.
A lot of people have said the whole thing about season 2 being a disappointment, but I think we need to nail down what it specifically was that disappointed so much. Or rather, I guess the better way to put it, Shades, what would you say was the canary in the coal mine for you when it came to season 2?
I think for me, it was the fact that they completely, like, for half the season, they shifted the cast over. They pulled a Raiden, basically, is what they did. Instead of focusing on the cast that we had come to love in season 1, they spent the first, like, half to 2/3 of the season, focusing on this brand new cast of characters that we had never known about before, and a storyline that had no connection. It wasn't until Alpha showed back up that there was any connection to season 1.
And unlike Hideo Kojima, they couldn't actually make the payoff work.
Yeah. Because
the Raiden payoff did work in the end. Mm-hmm. He got his own fucking action game made by Platinum, after all.
Exactly.
Is probably the most memed Metal Gear game ever.
Yeah.
As much as I would like to actually come up with a decent argument to try to defend season 2, I actually can't. I can't.
You cannot defend the indefensible, Doku.
I would like to try, but I can't.
The big problem that this is, and truth be told, this is a bit of an issue we've seen with a lot of shows that have been on streaming that get a second season, where they end up either focusing on a bunch of characters that haven't been built up, or try and massively expand the cast between seasons without actually building it up, probably because they didn't know if they were going to get a second season. Because I think thematically speaking, season 1 could be described as the fall of Alpha and the rise of Omega, simultaneously.
Yeah.
Especially given all the shit that Jin went through in the first season, even going blind. But
yeah.
Then all of a sudden, for season 2,
Burrito's here, Monk.
Ah, hey there, Burrito. And then for season 2, that story shifts over to Chihiro, who they try really, really hard to make a big damn deal about, but it's hard to really buy him as a Amazons. They try and do the whole Neo thing and these next generation types of Amazons. The problem is with a lot of them, they're using devices that aren't the belts that we're already familiar with.
And we weren't, because like Omega doesn't even show up until near the end. We're like, well, where's the guy we loved? Where's the guy we were enjoying up until now? What happened to him? And then he shows up and he's like half the man he used to be.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of that, I'm pretty. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall when you first saw the design of New Omega with all the cybernetics.
Yeah, the other canary in the coal mine, the big sign that season 2 was such a flop, was the movie that came after it,
Lost Judgment, which I didn't see.
I did. Me and the crew over at Tokusatsu, we did watch the movie for our stream. First of all, they destroyed the Neo belt and had Omega go back to his original form, which that should tell you how bad how much people hated New Omega, because they went back to regular Omega at the end. and they focused on Omega as the centerpiece of the story. Hell, Chihiro was hardly even involved. I don't even think he was hardly in the movie.
So, as someone who hasn't seen the movie, I'll just ask a very simple question. What was the point of the movie?
I don't remember exactly. It's been quite a few years since we watched the thing.
I think it was. I think part of it was this idea was doing the actual origin of the whole Amazon problem, because Chihiro is Amazon origin. The Neo thing was essentially a restrictor system. But beyond that, it felt like Last Judgment was an attempt to be an apology tour.
It really was, yeah.
See, this is kind of my point about if you have a follow up series or a season 2 to something that has a negative reception, it's usually received negatively for a reason, and it's because the tone, flavor, whatever you want to call it, is not consistent.
Yeah.
But if you have a movie and we're sitting here going, so, but what was the point of the movie? It's like, well, maybe it was this or maybe it was that. You definitely screwed it up. It doesn't fit. It doesn't work. And
it worked in this case to some extent. But you're not wrong. Also, bear in mind, it has been several years since I've seen the movie, so a lot of the memories of that movie have kind of faded over time. I've had to watch so much shit since then. So a lot of that has been kind of lost in my mind. So that's why I can't quite recall the full story of the movie. But I remember saying that the movie did do a good job of kind of apologize. It was a decent apology for season 2. And it did close a lot of the story beats from season 1.
But
Yeah.
the fact of the matter is, you're calling it an apology, and that's how you know, like, something somewhere went wrong. It shouldn't be an apology.
No, it shouldn't be.
Both GameFan and Zeltrax point out that Chihiro was killed at the end of season 2.
So yeah, Chihiro wasn't even involved in the movie. Yeah, that was I thought so. Like I said, I don't remember him even being in the movie. Anyway. But then there's the other problem. This is kind of the point that Monk was originally making when we brought up Amazons, was what it did outside of Amazons. Because the problem here is that because they wanted to make Amazon so badly, they took a lot of the budget away from the seasons that were airing at the time. One of them being Ghost.
Mm-hmm.
And my God, does it show, because Ghost ended up being one of the, at least in the bottom 5.
My name is Tenkuji Takeru, and
Don't
when I
you
was
fucking
18,
start!
I was killed by a raging gunman.
I already used that line when I did that one Devil May Cry 5 meme.
I know. It had to be said.
Yeah, Ghost was sacrificed in the name of Amazons. There's no question there. Because Ghost was such a piss-poor bland season. It wasn't even outright bad. It was just bland as fuck.
I will admit that one of the supporting characters pissed me off just because he brings shame to my moniker.
Oh yeah, Sonari. Oh, fucking Christ. And it does bring to us one of the bottom 5 worst Kamen Rider movies with the Spectre movie. Mm-hmm. Fuck that noise.
Yeah, I will not defend Spectre v Cinema. And
nope.
The other big problem that ended up happening is I remember when I heard that a lot of the budget got siphoned for Amazons. I remember making the joke of saying, does that include the budget for the opening theme? Because while Ghost is not the worst Kamen Rider series, I do believe that Ghost has the worst opening of any Kamen Rider series.
I'd say I'd debate between that one and Forze. I'd say Forze wins out only because it's still got the energy to it.
Forze at least has the energy. Ghost feels like one of those mid-tier openings for the filler era of Naruto.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I'll be
agree.
honest. I have a soft spot in my heart for the opening of Forze. Forze's opening is dear and near to me. In fact, Forze in general is dear and near to me, but that's a different story.
I will say, hearing the singer sing it live has actually endeared me to that opening a bit more over time. She's actually done it better over time than she originally did.
I think the problem is
versions.
that the energy doesn't have the same level of energy that a opening theme should, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I will also agree with Lenny in the chat. Saber is probably down there as well in the bottom 5 because fucking God nails on a chalkboard.
We've had that discussion. I'm not getting into it again.
Nope.
But at least Saber has some energy. Energy in the wrong places at the wrong pitches, but there's some energy. Therefore, doesn't have as much.
Yeah, no. Ghost definitely has one of the worst openings in Kamen Rider history, and that's sad.
Yeah.
Everything about Ghost is either boring or bad. There's just no getting around it.
There's one thing about Ghost that is good. And you know who I'm about to say. Edith.
I thought you were going to say Tuxedo Mask.
The Hermit. You know, who was also the general over in the Gamma world. He's the best part because he's actually funny.
Okay, I would also give a little bit of nod to Alan.
Yeah, who ended up becoming the breakout.
The guy. I feel bad for Alan, and do you know why I feel bad for Alan? The Necron driver is the worst brace driver we have ever fucking seen. That thing is bulky as shit. Oh my god!
No, I agree with that. And he got fucked in the Spectre V cinema. Oh my god.
Yeah. But and to be fair, when it comes to the V cinema projects as a whole, since they started doing those over the last few years, they've really been a mixed bag. They're either pretty good or they're either pretty good to meh or they're really bad. Yeah. But it's not what I would call consistent.
I want to kind of help direct this back on the rails to a certain point, because here's the thing why we're complaining a lot about just general Heisei era Kamen Riders, because even when he's not directly involved in a series like stuff like Geo, he's still been known to be a hands-on executive producer at Toei Studios. So even series that he's not named in as being involved, he's still involved.
Yeah, the man has many irons and many fires.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you feel his influence in the more modern era of Kamen Rider. A lot of the more modern shows have his stamps all over it in terms of how stories are written, how certain tropes are constantly reused. You can tell, and it's doubly so in the Sentai department. When you look at the work in Sentai, his hands are all fucking over it.
Would you say that he is one of the big contributing factors to the idiot red problem that we've had over the last 20 years?
I can't outright state that, but I wouldn't be fucking surprised.
I'm not saying he's the factor, because when it comes to the idiot red problem, that's something that happened gradually over several years.
And we discussed that in a very early GeekWatch.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
I think that he's started to go a little more hands-off when it comes to Kamen Rider, because Kamen Rider is becoming such a breakout, even in the West, without his influence.
Mm-hmm.
So he's more willing to stand back, let what succeeds, and just try and advocate for it moving west. If that makes sense.
Although Iron Mouse made an interesting point a while back when she had said that it seems that whenever Sentai does good, Kamen Rider's kind of weak, and vice versa.
Except there, when I was still in the Across server, and yes, I left the Across server for multiple reasons. There were postings of sales numbers, and year over year for like the last 8 years, Sentai has mostly gone down, with a couple of shows stepping back up to a line that wasn't above where they started at 8 years ago. And both Kamen Rider and then comparing to Tsuburaya Ultra, those have been going just nonstop gangbusters up. Mm-hmm. They haven't stopped. Kamen Rider especially.
I think I can explain why. Because the problem with Sentai, especially in this day and age, is that Sentai pretty much stays the same. It stays this kid-friendly, happy-go-lucky, poppy series in such a dark time, whereas Kamen Rider is willing to dabble in more mature, more serious stories. And it varies each time. Like, some series can be more uppity than others, but for the most part, they tend to be a little more serious.
That being the case, I'd like to present a, for the sake of rhetoric, where Ultraman fits into that, because we've talked about how Ultraman sticks to a lot of its traditions quite a bit.
So from what I saw in just the numbers alone, and so we can't go off the prevailing themes or anything, but just the numbers alone, Ultraman doesn't make as much money compared to Kamen Rider. It was something like I think it was 6 billion or 7 billion yen last year compared to the 20 or so billion yen of Kamen Rider. But Tsuburaya is also, smaller than Toei slightly. And also Ultraman, even in Tokusatsu, Ultraman has kind of become a niche within Tokusatsu. Because of the big names like Kamen Rider, like Super Sentai. It's still one of the big three, but it's definitely the smallest of like the big three. That being said, with its traditions, it does have its traditions, true, but it tries to use those traditions in new ways each show. Sometimes that goes way too far when they're trying to sell toys, but that's all part about experimenting. They're still willing to experiment, like Shades said about Kamen Rider. They're still willing to experiment and try and change and shift with the times instead of remaining stuck in their ways.
And I think the thing is that with Sentai, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. They do try to experiment, but in ways that are still safe. They have the gimmick. They try to do the gimmick stuff, but they still try to do a lot of the same story beats every season, and that ends up becoming a problem because it's like they're not real. They're doing new gimmicks, but they're still doing the same stories. And
I think a case in point is putting aside Zenkaiger and Dawn Brothers because those are their own beast. Let's consider the motifs that we've put up with for the last few years. With Kira Major, it was vehicles.
And imagination and crystals.
Yeah. With Lupat, it was police and it was
cops and robbers.
Yeah, cops and robbers. And before that, I believe we had. I think before that we had, was it Ninja? No, it was Q Ranger.
Q Ranger,
which was space themed.
It was constellation themed specifically.
Mm-hmm. Before that, we had Ninja, which was once again ninja
and contraptions. I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
Just mechanical things in general.
Here's the thing: the general themes change, but there's a lot of the same themes. Like you also skip Ryu Soldier, which was dinosaur themed with Dino Knights.
Yeah,
but the
fourth dinosaur themed show.
Yeah, fucking Christ! But the real problem is the story beats. Not everyone has their own. Every season has their own stories, but the same beats, the same kinds of stories are being told every season in Sentai. They still have like a body switch episode. They'll still have a Christmas themed episode. They still have all these same tropes that a lot of them, which are tropes that have died a painful death ages ago that nobody likes.
Even Japan doesn't want anything to do with them.
And yet, with Sentai, they still keep doing them. The reason why Kamen Rider keeps succeeding is because it doesn't really rely on those tropes. It relies on tropes that work. But Sentai doesn't.
I can safely say that with Revice, things like the body swap episode or the aging episode, I haven't seen that at all. And
the body swap episode was literally the Jack Revice episode, but you see, it doesn't really count because Vice is, well, Iki's demon.
Yeah, so it's different there. But like that's my point, is that with Sentai, no matter what the motif, no matter what the theme, no matter what the storyline, you see a lot of the same kind of episode tropes popping up again and again and again, and it just gets sickening.
Hell,
after a while,
I'd say even though I liked Kira Major, I'd say it's a bit of a damning statement that they had to come crawling back to Arikawa to get him to come back.
Yeah.
I liken it to when Saban was crawling to Judd Lin. In both cases, you're trying to go to the writers who wrote the book on how to do seasons for Power Rangers and Super Sentai respectively. And you have this problem of doing stuff that was done before.
Yeah, the only and with Chip Lin coming back to Power Rangers, even then he tried to step outside that box. He's like, yeah, I know how this shit works, but I also means I know how to play with it. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened with Arakawa. Yeah, Arakawa did have those same tropes in his episodes, but in Kira Major, he played with those tropes. He did different things with those tropes so they didn't become stale, monotonous, and boring. But when everyone else keeps trying to go back to those same wells, they just do it for the sake of doing it. Mm-hmm. You do the body swap episode because you have to have a body swap episode. Not because you want to do something interesting with that body swap. You just want to do it. And it's painfully obvious.
I believe we call this design by gospel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would make the argument that it's not necessarily about the tropes or even the themes or even just going beat by beat what you expect, but it's about maintaining a tone. And when it comes to especially when it comes to like Sentai shows, you expect a certain tone, you expect a certain style, and if you break out of that, maybe it works from time to time, but for the most part, it usually doesn't. And so I would argue it's really about you're trying to do something that just doesn't work because that's not what people expect from the show. It's just not going to work.
I disagree with that, actually. Here's the thing. Go ahead, Zan. Go ahead. You've been trying to talk.
The big thing is that the reason that this quote-unquote atmosphere is reinforced is because they insist on reinforcing it within Toei first. That expectation was never there until Toei started reinforcing that expectation. Breaking that expectation is only going to be to their benefit if it's done right. Now, that's the key. It has to be done right. They can't just try to break the mold for breaking the mold's sake either, because that's still technically designed by gospel.
Even if they broke the mold...
Actually, I will concede to that. Even if they broke
the mold a little bit with Zenkaiger, let's consider the fact that right after that, they decided to try and do something similar to that again with Dawn Brothers.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally like the freaking gimmick is almost identical, for fuck's sake. But here's the other thing:
Dawn Brothers is, from what I've been seeing here, it's not. I'm pretty sure Dawn Brothers is supposed to be a connected sequel,
to some extent. But here's the other thing. We talked about Ultraman earlier, and I want to make this comparison to show why this keeps happening. What the difference is. Yes, with Ultraman, the suit designs are very similar. The gimmicks are similar, but the whole mix matching of different past Ultras and everything, and we've complained about that in the past. But they don't always cover the same beats, and they try to do something different with the storyline every time. Mm-hmm. Like you watch Ultraman Z and you watch Ultraman G'd. They're not the same. The storyline is very different. They don't hit the same beats all the time. Yeah, there's a similar structure overall, but they're not. There's a lot of key differences that help them stand out and add some variety to each season. They don't always work, but for the most part, they at least try to do something different where it counts. Mm-hmm. And that's where Sentai keeps failing.
Well, man, but that's fine. More of the issue that I guess I have is when you set a particular type of tone for a show, yeah, you might deviate from it a little bit, but for the most part, you stay on track. And the reason I've stopped watching a lot of Sentai shows is just because either A, they're stale, or B, the tone is all over the place, and it might maybe it's subtle, maybe it's just me getting bored. I don't know, but it's not. How do I put it? Maybe I'm nostalgic, but it's not this. It's not what I expect out of a Sentai show.
I think be very, very careful with expectations, because it's very easy for expectations to turn into that gospel problem and that tradition problem that Zan and I discussed when we did the video on Final Fantasy 16.
I was about to bring that up, that much like how Final Fantasy doesn't actually have a codified feel to it and has changed and experimented with every game, from the spin-offs to the sequential mainstream games, none of them has the exact same beats, atmosphere, or themes. They have some generic, overarching, this is kind of what you need sort of to feel like Final Fantasy, but not really, crystals, sometimes the same mascot creatures, etc. But
I feel you there. I mean, that's honestly why I thought Final Fantasy VI was such a great game, because it didn't feel really like a Final Fantasy game, so it felt like a more of a sci-fi game than a fantasy game, really. But it was an amazing game.
The point I'm getting at is the one thing that, like, when I look at all the big three Toku series franchises, Kamen Rider, the big thing with it is a kind of a hero's journey, coming of age story every time, but how they tell it is very different every time. There's key story beats that they don't touch on every season. There are similar tropes, but the key story beats change.
Yeah, they keep the
Ultraman has similar story beat, similar tropes, but Slick Rick points on the chat. Compare Orb to Jeed. Orb was a veteran's journey. He was a veteran hero who'd been a hero a long time ago, who came back and tried to recollect himself. Compare that to Jeed, who was a guy who didn't even know what his place in the world was, only to find out he was the son of the big bad and wanted to prove that he was beyond just being that thing. They're very different storylines, told very different story beats, and thus didn't have that same, while it felt similar in some ways, it didn't feel similar in others. But with Sentai, while the overall motif may change and the story may change, there are certain story beats and certain episode tropes that they just constantly keep going back to. And even though nobody likes them, they just keep using them, and it gets annoying after a while.
Yeah. If you want to imitate, quote unquote, I'm going to use this very loosely, the feel of an Ultra series, the tropes that you'll commonly see are the beings of light, the giants of light from the nebula, that are possibly inheriting a person on Earth, hiding amongst Earth's peoples to fight an evil from outside Earth's understanding. That is so broad as to be a general backdrop. And that doesn't make an Ultra. That's just some signifiers you might find in Ultra. Then you paint on top of that canvas you've made with all the little details. And while everybody's using the same canvas, the way they use their paints is vastly different. Mm-hmm. Whereas with Super Sentai, while everybody's using the same canvas, they also kind of seem to be copying each other. Sure, what colors they choose are different, but the shapes are the same. Or maybe the theme of the painting is the same. Everybody's painting cars. They're just different types of cars.
I would argue that that Sentai does the exact opposite of Ultra. They use the same paints on different canvases.
Okay, I can see that too.
Mm-hmm. And either way, the end result is the fact that when everybody else is experimenting in these bold new directions, even within Sentai associated stuff, it just feels like it's a few years behind the ball.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we have the wacky tokusatsu from out of nowhere, Garo, that experiments by not only changing drastically from live series to live series, but experiments by, interspersing live series with anime, which have all been fantastic. God, those anime are so good. Jesus.
But yeah. We've gone completely off the rails in terms of our main topic here, but it also shows the point that Sentai, because Shirakura is clearly a lot more hands-on with Sentai, this is what we've been running into with this problem. And while we didn't really want to bring Sentai too heavily into this, I think it really does show the example of why Shirakura's involvement has been a problem, because a lot of those same story beats that we've been complaining about, those are the kind of things Shirakura loved. And you see that, like, you look back at Zyuranger and a lot of the shit they did then, and you see a lot of similarities to what Modern Sendai's been doing over the last 10 to 15 years.
Specifically the fact that he conflates an all ages production with kids show. And the big reason, I'm pretty sure you and I are on the same page with this, Shades. The big reason why I always cringe whenever somebody uses kids show in their argument is it's a shorthand for not only pandering to kids, but the argument of we shouldn't even try to write.
Yeah, it's an excuse for bad writing. Like, why bother writing a good show when only little kids are going to watch it? You know what my son watches right now? Yes, he watches some dumb shows from time to time, but you know what some of his favorite stuff is right now? He's watching stuff like My Hero Academia and Fairy Tail. Stuff with good writing.
And I think all of us grew up with a lot of Bruce Timm's work.
Of course.
Yeah.
And especially the stuff now, a little less so with the stuff he was doing for Superman for obvious reasons, but the stuff he was doing with Batman especially could hardly fit into that kids show stereotype.
It was an all ages show, yeah.
Easily.
Not too long ago, I ended up rewatching Exo Squad, and I do agree with Chuck that the only thing that really holds Exo Squad back is the look of it. It looks like an 80s show. It's an 80s show with a 90s plot. That's the way I describe it. And I've seen some people try and lump it in with some of those bad animated shows on the USA Network that have tormented our good buddy TJ up to and one of them tormenting Zan and I personally, that being BattleTech. We do not do bachals here.
You dare! I couldn't even say that with a straight face. You dare to refuse my bachal! There we go.
Fucking cleaners. But those particular works don't really fall into that, and but he has this idea that in order for something that all ages equals kids, and this is the reason why I keep picking on Zyuranger, because it's pretty much a grand tour of a lot of Shirakura's bad habits. The whole thing with kids, the whole thing of claiming to have a theme but not following through on it, since it tries to have a fairy tale-like atmosphere. But but the closest that it gets to that is some of the villain designs, and even on that front, MMPR was more on point with trying to lean into Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. Making Rita Repulsa sound like the Wicked Witch of the West, I think did a better job on that regard.
That and with trying to have Zordon do a faux British thing to try and have him be somewhat like Oz.
At least at first, they ditched that after a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I barely remember Zordon's faux British thing. It was there for, 5 episodes?
It was there for the first part of season 1, when David Fielding was actually doing the voice as well as the face, but then they eventually ditched that and just had him do a normal voice.
Mm-hmm. But at the very least, trying to use Wizard of Oz as a framework is a little bit more on point when you're trying to reference fairy tales. I've seen some say that there's supposed to be a very fey atmosphere with Zyuranger, but if I'm being honest, I barely saw it.
Like I said, Zyuranger, mid.
Yeah.
And YGM has a good point calling it Child Plots the series, and from what I'm aware, even Japan doesn't like the child plots.
Yeah, like I said, there's a lot of tropes that a lot of people, even in Japan, get sick of. Child plots, body swaps, a couple of other tropes they just cannot stand. And yet they keep showing up in Sentai even to this day. It's like, why? Why would you keep using a trope when nobody wants it? Like, did they not see that post? Did they not see that article that basically pointed out that even in Japan, nobody likes that shit?
Kyoryuger tried to do something different, but it fell into the same trap. But truth be told, I think Riku Sanju was more interested in taking the piss out of the PTA, given the fact that he would take blatant shots at them multiple times.
The best example was the episode with the little lamb monster that turned into basically an evil thing, and the bratty kid that had to learn how to get on his own feet and stop relying on his parents to bail him out all the fucking time. That was a blatant attack on parent groups.
Yeah, because he had been fighting them for a while, and he's made it clear that he has no love lost for them, and probably is going to keep taking pot shots at him until the lawyers get involved and he's forced to stop. I can respect that level of pettiness.
Of course you can. You're just as petty.
Exactly.
Game recognized game.
Which is why he knows I'm just as petty.
But
why do you think we keep you around?
We a bunch of petty motherfuckers around these parts.
Damn right.
But the point is that in doing that, I think the reason why he's been more hands-on with Super Sentai is that whenever he tries to do that sort of thing with Kamen Rider, he gets far more pushback because Kamen Rider has always I'd say from day one leaned far more into a more young adult tone than an outright kids like tone. I'd say one of the closest cases that Kamen Rider has leaned into a kids like tone would probably be Den-O, and even that's a stretch.
Yeah,
Den-O's the closest.
Den-O's the closest because, well, let's be honest, the Imagine have become a kid's icon, and why they keep bringing them back all the fucking time. Mm-hmm. But even in Den-O, you had stuff like Yuto Sakurai and his storyline during that series, which was very mature and very serious, sacrificing his own existence for the sake of his girl.
Mm-hmm.
And he keeps coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah. How the fuck do they keep pulling that off? I don't know.
Especially when the whole thing was that the original was losing his memory, people were losing the memory of him every time he transformed, or in the case of Zero, losing memory of the young Sakurai.
Yeah.
but when it but because but the just that particular fact, and the fact that a lot of people are familiar with the origins of Kamen Rider, and even in the original show back in the 70s, there's always been that subtext of horror within a lot of Ishinomori's work.
Yeah.
He's always had some horrific elements all the way back to Cyborg 009 and earlier.
Yeah. Which is why it's no surprise that he's friends with Go Nagai.
Go Nagai. Oh no. The father of modern super robots,
among other and the godfather of pushing the envelope.
God, I love Go Nagai.
Yeah, a lot of people think that Shotaro Ishinomori was kid friendly. Did none of y'all read the Skull Man? the original Skull Man.
I have read the original and the rebooted Skullman manga, and it's one very, very important distinction to make with it is Skullman is not by any stretch of the imagination the hero in that story.
No. They make it very clear that by the end the Skullman he wasn't exactly the villain. He was at best an anti-hero, but he was one that was guided by revenge, and when he realized how far that revenge had taken him, he's like, he just allowed himself to be sacrificed at the end because he's like, I don't want to walk down the same path my parents did.
Mm-hmm. And one of the more poignant scenes in the manga for me was the whole thing of we were born in the wrong era as the temple is burning.
Hey everybody, I have a great idea. Let's make a show about an extra dimensional threat that average everyday people would never be able to fight against, and then force average everyday people to fight against it, and just see how they manage to cope with that burden on a day-to-day basis. Because, heroes and shit.
We already did that. It was called Power / Rangers. Nobody likes it.
But if you think about it from a normal person perspective, yeah. Hey, normal high school kid, go fight against something that is world ending. Because
Madoka Magica already did that.
I can't disagree on that. At least with Madoka Magica, you kind of knew. At least QB, as much of a dick as QB was, still told you, like, yeah, you're going up against something that you have pretty much no real hopes of fighting. When it comes to Sentai, it's like, yeah, the world's gonna end. Go stop it. But bro, I just got like an A on a math test. It's like, yeah, that's why you're gonna go save the world. Well, because I got an A on a math test? Yes.
The funny thing is that particular archetype that you're talking about isn't as common as you think.
I know it's not, but tell me that's not the fucking archetype that they use. It might not be just the smart kid or the meathead, or I know there's the tropes.
You're thinking way too much of MMPR with that.
Yeah.
They're making the same
seasons actually gave us some people who actually could have done it. I mean, Lightspeed Rescue anybody?
You're making the same mistake that Renegade did with the Power Rangers tabletop.
Yeah. We
have an entire reconstruction about that.
Yeah. Along with my review of it, which was rage level guts, and I don't get angry all that often.
Yeah, hearing Monk get angry is a rare treat for me.
Same.
Because I like to save my anger like it's worth its weight in gold. so that I don't cheapen it. But
Whereas I think my hatred and anger is as ubiquitous as water. Everybody needs a little bit of it.
yeah. Now, as far as why, even though he was a producer on Die Ranger, as far as why Die Ranger didn't have as much of a problem, I get the feeling he wasn't as hands-on with Die Ranger as he was with Zeo Ranger.
Yeah, I don't think he had the clout to be able to do that like he did later on in life. I think at that point he was still kind of in the, like you said, he was just a regular producer, and he didn't have as much clout to be able to make the influences he did. So Die Ranger's director was able to get away with a lot more shit.
Yeah, and as far as Q Ranger, he was only a advisor, and but Q Ranger had a host of problems that one day we may end up going into in detail. Least of which being Riku Sanjo had the attitude of, "I'm not good with large casts. Why the fuck are you giving me a 10-man team?" And then they're like, "Hey, he managed to make a success with a 10-man team. Let's make an even bigger team."
Yeah. We don't. Riku Sanjo did the absolute best he could with
Basically by
Kyoryuger.
splitting it in half.
Yeah, with Kyoryuger, and I'm going to be honest, Kyoryuger is a great series, but the fact that he made that he made 10 work made them greedier for an even larger team.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Q Ranger was so when I first saw Q Ranger, and I knew that they were using Q as a triple or even quadruple entendre. But it obviously means 9. I'm like, oh, they're eventually going to get 9 Rangers. I mean, we've had slightly larger, and Kyoryuger works, and then they added 3 more, and I was like, this is bullshit. I legit when I remember when they started going above 9, I'm like, this is bullshit. Now the name doesn't make sense anymore, you dicks.
Wait, you can get beer from a vending machine? Bring me the entire vending machine.
They had by the end they had a total of 12.
12 Rangers, yeah. Can't forget Ho-Oh Soldier.
Mm-hmm.
Who isn't even based on a fucking constellation.
The only redemption there is that's motherfucking Tsurugi. You don't fuck with motherfucking Tsurugi.
Yes, you also don't fuck with him when he's a Humagear lawyer. Bengoshi.
Mm-hmm. But the problem when you have that many moving parts is you can't juggle that many plates. Even the best performers in Vegas aren't going to be able to spin that many plates and keep them up. One of them's going to drop.
And that tends to be Shirakura's problem in a nutshell, is that he tries to do the work of like 5 guys half the time with trying to put his hands into everything.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, I think Shirakura could probably temper the negative effect he has on things with delegation.
And Slick Rick is saying that Phoenix is a constellation.
Wait, is it?
In the East, there's a stronger argument, but a lot of the constellations that were used up to that point, aside from Ryu Commander, were mostly Western constellations.
Yeah.
Phoenix is indeed a constellation.
Yeah, but it's more of an Eastern constellation than a Western one. You look at the constellations that were utilized for the first batch of characters. Lucky is obviously, we have Leo, we have Libra, and so on. There's some that are a bit of a stretch, and once again we have that whole thing of establishing a theme and not sticking to it.
Pretty much.
Because if you're going to base a story on fairy tales, then you should commit to that concept. And truth be told, if there was any tokusatsu that I'd say outright commits to the idea of being about fairy tales, oddly enough, it's Kamen Rider Saber.
Yeah, but Kamen Rider Saber has its own problems that we don't need to get into.
No, not here.
And in the case of, and even if it's just on fairy tale creatures, Wizard does a better job with that with the Phantoms.
See, and I'd like to make a small correction here. Phoenix is a constellation in the southern hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see it in the northern hemisphere. And almost all of the constellations Q Ranger was based on were constellations seen in the northern hemisphere, even the eastern ones.
All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and head on. I'm starting to fade over here.
All right,
Alrighty,
man,
Shades.
Stay frosty.
All right,
right,
Shades,
guys.
have a good one, bro.
But the point is, with his particular issues, that whole thing of, as we mentioned before, him viewing the whole kid thing, and the issue of not being able to stick to a theme, which I do put on him, because I wouldn't be surprised if in a writer's room he's like, oh, we need to add this kind of thing. He's like, but that doesn't fit what we established. Put it in anyways.
Yep. Put it in because it has to be in there because that's what people expect.
Mm-hmm. Or you have at times the issue of him putting him trying to do something even though it doesn't fit. I will admit that when it came to Amazons, I did get a little bit of annoyed with that comment of, remember when Kamen Rider had teeth, which you're the last person in the room who should be talking about that.
Yeah.
And I know we've been roasting him over an open flame. He is doing a better job, but I don't want that better job to be used as a pretext to erase what came before. Despite him doing a better job does not necessarily mean doing a good job. And
Exactly.
when it comes to the direction that that keeps being insisted on with Sentai, he isn't, and they're still stuck in the Car Ranger problem where they think, hey, we tried doing something slightly serious, it didn't do massively, so let's do something silly, even though that's never fucking worked ever.
See, that's the issue I have when it comes to tone. If you set the tone, it has to be done within the first 1 to 2 episodes, preferably within the first 3, so people know what to expect. If you go from like episode 1, 2, and 3 and you have a particular tone set, but then you hit episode 5 and it's like, yeah, we're gonna do something silly. It's like, but no, you wanted to do something serious, and it doesn't work.
The only time I give slack for that sort of tonal shift when it came to Sentai is O Ranger, and that's because of outside circumstances.
All right, that's fair. I can't really. I want to criticize it, but I can't because I understand the point. My larger point is this: if you want to do something, if you have a general idea of what you want something to be, just stick to it. It shouldn't be that difficult of a thing to do, and I do find this kind of annoying about I'm not going to say it's exclusive to like Kamen Rider or these particular types of series in general, because it can be done well, and it doesn't have to be focused on a mature audience or a kid audience or an audience for all ages. You can pull these things off as long as you stick to the type of story you want to tell. This is going to sound like a weird example, but look at frickin' Casher and Sense.
Which was a completely different adaptation of the Kashurn story from the initial Robot Hunter.
But I would make the argument it works, and
It
you
does.
could, and you can look at the type of tone that story sets, and I would say that the story beats and the tone and the style would fit well within what we're talking about, even though it's not. I wouldn't really say Casher and Sins is a Kamen Rider esque type of story. I'm sure some people would say it is. I personally don't think it is, but looking at the tone and the story beats, you could easily take it and adapt it to something that is a Kamen Rider type of story, and it would work. But it's all about setting the tone. As soon as you break away from the tone that you set, though, it's maybe if you have really good writers and a decent director, yeah, maybe you can break away from that once or twice and then bring it back on beat and it will still work. But for the most part, if you break away from that particular tone once, good luck. I don't think it's gonna work.
I disagree, because there are always episodes that are lighthearted levity episodes in darker series, and there are always darker episodes in series that are lighthearted and full of levity. You have to have that contrast to give people moments to breathe. There needs to be moments of catharsis for both paths, or you're going to either stress people out, or you're going to leave them feeling that there's nothing serious, and there's no drama worth watching.
There's a reason why the term comic relief has the term relief.
Okay, so then I have one question.
Mm-hmm.
Would you rather dedicate an entire episode to it, or would you rather have moments throughout a single episode, once or twice? Would you rather dedicate a minute, a couple of minutes, maybe 5 minutes, or maybe even half an episode to that type of comic relief to relieve the intensity? Or would you rather just have one episode slapped in the middle of a series that's just dedicated to comic relief? Because and this is personal preference, I cannot stand series where it's just one episode that is just dedicated to nothing but comic relief. I feel like it breaks the entire flow of the entire of the show. I would rather have a show that has a few moments in each episode that breaks the intensity, but it's only 1 or 2 minutes dedicated to breaking that intensity. I don't want 20 minutes of, someone going to a beach and watching fireworks, and then the next episode is like, okay, let's go kill the demon lord or bad guy. Shit like that. That drives me nuts. I hate that break in intensity.
The one problem that I have with what you're going with on that, and I'll get this out of my system, and then we'll get back on the rails, is this is not something that you can put that level of black and white thinking on. It's all about context. The reason why a lot of anime have a beach episode, if you will, is because it's meant to be a kind of resetting of the board before things really turn to shit.
No, that's fair. I don't disagree.
My answer, would I rather have it comedic moments throughout episodes every so often, or have a single comedic episode? My answer is yes. You need both. You need it all, in fact. But the problem isn't that you have them. The problem is how they're executed. If they're executed poorly, yeah, it's going to derail you. But if they're executed well, it's going to lend itself to the story. Your last example of, everybody gathering on the beach for fireworks before they go off to kill the big bad, that's the Last Supper moment. That's the moment of, we could all die tomorrow, so let's have one last hurrah before we go out to fight the big bad. And if it's executed well, it's not going to break your intensity. It's going to be the moment of calm before the storm. That's my issue with the overgeneralization here. You can't paint it with that broad of a brush. It's not possible.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. I cannot disagree with that. That's actually a very good point.
Now, getting back to the matter at hand, if the way things are going, I get the feeling you're going to see in about a year, you're going to see some attempts for Super Sentai to throw something at the wall, because even though they're doing the direct sequel thing for the first time with Dawn Brothers, they can't do that forever. They can't keep dipping back into that.
It's a neat experiment.
It's certainly a neat experiment, but it's an experiment that doesn't have a long shelf life. That was the problem that I had with them with bringing back Arikawa. It's a nice thing to see him back and see that he hasn't lost a step, but he's not going to stick around for subsequent years.
Well, and I think, with the point you made near the beginning of this episode of Shirakura listening to Western fans, realizing there's a Western audience, I think that with the involvement of the Western fans, so long as you listen to the ones that are reasonable and not the fandoms we all hate, he's going to be able to temper some of his bad habits. He may be an older gentleman who's been in this position for 30 years now, but that doesn't mean he can't learn, as is very clear from the fact that he went, there's a Western audience, we better try to capitalize on that. That's an entire audience we're missing out on. What the fuck? So I think, as much as we rag on him, as much as we dunk on him, as much as we roast him, as much as we call him Mr. Shirakura because we're comparing him to Mr. McMahon, I think that unlike McMahon, Shirakura has the ability to change and evolve.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately.
Yeah.
Well, and when you touch on that point, and this is just kind of a question that I have for the two of you, do you really think whether you're directing a Sentai show or let's look at something else, Godzilla, do you think that they actually expected there to be that much popularity amongst a Western audience? Because I don't think they actually thought there would be.
Tsubudaya definitely did, because that's why their breakout into the West has been so good.
Well, but initially, at the very beginning of the concept, like, dude, do you think that someone thought something like Power Rangers or Godzilla, a kaiju movie? I can understand why it would be popular in Japan, but why would it be popular amongst a Western audience? I don't think they actually thought it would be as popular as it was, and once they realized, holy crap, it is.
I have one question. Relevance.
Well, so the relevance is, I feel like they're looking at the audience they have now versus the audience they thought they were going to have, and they're trying to shift.
So ultimately, that actually isn't as relevant as you might think.
Well, that's why I'm curious.
I think the issue more is that a fan outcry in Japan is not nearly as impactful as you might think it could be, due to the group dynamic of Japanese people and the fact that they don't quite, like, they're vocal, but the ones that are most vocal are also the ones that are viewed as the bad type of otaku. So to a certain extent, because of cultural differences between Japan and the West, the fan outcry at some of the poor things that occurred under Shirakura's control isn't as impactful as it would be coming from the West, because the West is a market that has different cultural standards, so you can't just dismiss all the loud voices as otaku anymore.
No, especially since in other media we've seen what happens when you try and dismiss the quote unquote otaku.
Yeah, the biggest thing here is that because of the expansion of their the perceived expansion of their viewer base, they can the voices now have more impact. But they would only be aware of that expanded base once they talked to the West. Whether they expected there to be an audience beyond Japan or not, there are some companies who have foresight that do see an expanded audience outside of Japan. And those companies have waffled. I mean, Square used to think a lot about their outside Japanese audience. Then they stopped thinking about them for a while, and then FF14, specifically A Realm Reborn. And at that point, Square realized once again that they do have a global audience, and that realization is always going to cause a paradigm shift. So if they had thought about it beforehand, the question wouldn't be relevant, because then they'd already be designing in a way in consideration of their global audience.
Okay. No, like I said, I was just curious to see what you guys thought about it, because it's something I've pondered.
Yeah. Now,
what ifs are good.
What ifs are good, but once again, everything in moderation.
Indeed.
I don't have a lot of doubts for the future of Kamen Rider. If anything, what we've been seeing that's supposed to be coming down the pipe over the next few years is making it seem like Kamen Rider is definitely a high priority, because not only is there the Shin Kamen Rider project as the final piece of Anno's Shin trilogy, but there's also the remake, the quote unquote remake of Black with Black Sun.
Yep, Black Sun is looking interesting, like really interesting. I really want to see it.
And I can definitely say that this is the most insect-like the suit design has been in a long time.
Yeah, they almost look like Guyver.
Mm-hmm. In that organic sense, we've had plenty of bug-based writers over the years, but they haven't looked as organic.
Yeah, which is why I invoked Guyver here.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who knows us knows Guyver's near and dear to our hearts, and knows that the show itself is also batshit insane.
Oh yeah,
and the manga.
And it provided the inspiration for a certain comic, which I still haven't gotten yet.
Yeah.
But that is a whole other story I don't want to get into. When it comes to the future of Super Sentai, I can't help but shake the feeling that the combination of Shirakura's habits and the fact that the successes have been with these dart throws does make me a bit concerned for the state of Super Sentai, and I do think that they're going to be taking an active listening role to the Western fan base, not if for no other reason than a lack of options.
Go ahead.
Much in the same way that bringing in Yoshi P, who had mostly worked on a lot of Western MMOs, was a necessity because of all the options they ran out of with Final Fantasy XIV 1.0.
Correction, it wasn't that he worked on a lot of Western MMOs. He was a fan of Western MMOs. He worked on a lot of Dragon Quest stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay, slight correction on that. I mostly knew of Yoshi P beforehand through his involvement on the Japanese end of Ultima Online.
Yeah, that he was involved with that, but his primary The big thing that he brought to the table with ARR was comparisons to things like WoW, because he was a big fan of Western MMOs.
Mm-hmm.
But that's Rails.
Yeah. The point is, given the fact that the Hasbro era has been doing pretty good for itself when it comes to Power Rangers, and the runaway success that the Boom comics have, I think is something that Toei is going to be taking a more active notice on, and it wouldn't be the first time that there's been some back adaptation. I know a lot of people will bring up Go Busters in regards to this, but that's not the only case. And I could bring up Akiba Ranger in this as well, but that's way too easy.
That's unofficial, Monk. You can't bring it up. I'm sorry.
1, unofficial. 2, it's kind of the whole Powerful Rangers thing was kind of the joke.
Yep. You Japanese Super Sentai ripped off our American Powerful Rangers. What?
Yeah.
Well,
Anyone
honestly, I know
anyone watching that episode was just like, the fuck?
I know this is Rails, and I'll keep it brief. But if you were gonna take the risk, right now is actually the best time to do it.
Well, right now they're right in the middle of Dawn Brothers, so can't. But
again, if you're gonna do it, right now is the best time.
did you not hear what I just said?
No, I know. And yeah, but think about it, Mildred.
Don't butt him.
Just saying, think about it, man.
I did.
What's
my
your
answer's-
competition?
It's not a matter of competition. It's a matter of they're already in the middle of something.
No,
Doku? Just drop it.
Yeah, that's why I stopped.
Now, I think we've exhausted the point when it comes to Shirakura. He's definitely improved, but he has a lot more room for improvement. And while Kamen Rider is more or less redeemed from the questionable days of the early Heisei period, Super Sentai a little bit less so.
Yeah.
And that's going to need to change if both of them are going to be successful in the future.
And I want to make it very clear. We, again, one last time, we rag on people like Shirikura and McMahon. But the difference between the two is McMahon at this point is a joke because he doesn't know how to do better anymore. He's way too controlling, and he doesn't want to relinquish that control.
I'd say he's drowning in toxic positivity because he overvalued loyalty.
Yeah. Whereas Shirakura, I think, is more... rather than it being attributed to direct terrible considerations, it's more Shirakura doesn't know any better. He just needs to learn. He needs to consider more options than he has in the past. And once he learns to look at those in the bigger picture, he might be willing to stop considering Sentai instead of all ages a true kids show, and start giving it the all ages treatment it deserves.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going to take time and the right people telling him these things in a calm and rational manner, which, when interacting with fans on the internet, isn't exactly the best way to do it.
It's gonna say good luck, but yeah, and I do have one question. Why does Sentai need to be focused for kids? Because I've seen Sentai done in ways that are very dark and not kid friendly. So
We all have.
yeah,
But-
so that's kind of a question. Like,
But
but why?
his approach is that's the reason why we keep bringing up Jew Ranger. because that's basically the template that he's been relying upon for so long. And the thing is, everybody else in the tokusatsu scene is moving past that line of thinking. Is kind of where we're getting at with that, but we're going in circles by this point. So
Yeah.
I do want to note a few things. Now, obviously, I'll be doing my usual amount of interviews throughout next week. But there's a few other things to keep an eye out for. First off, on Wednesday, Zan and I will be doing a bit of monastic therapy covering Metroid Dread. Friday will be the conclusion of our look at the Magi Knights playtest on the Valley of the Judged. However, there will not be any GeekWatch episode next Sunday on the 26th.
Yeah, you guys can't open the forbidden door.
Yeah, the reason for that is AEW and New Japan's Forbidden Door pay-per-view is going on that night, and if I try and do double duty, I'm going to be completely wiped. Like I'm gonna have no energy to do that back to back, and even I can be a bit of a marathon man, but even I have my limits. That being said, that doesn't mean we're not doing something on Sunday, because some of you may recall way back in 2019, I did a stream called the E3 Hangover Special.
Oh God, no.
Well, now that my computer is properly upgraded and I can run a video playlist without running the risk of crashing, as was demonstrated with the FF16 episode, it's time to bring it back. For the first time in 3 years, we are going to be doing the E3 Hangover Special, and some of you may be familiar with other content creators covering stuff like E3. But those of you who weren't here in 2019 will end up learning that I do things a little bit differently. If you're expecting me to cover the presentations and the like, we don't do that here.
Remember, we look for the deep magic.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were there when it was written.
We'll probably be doing that around 3 Central. I may, depending on how big the playlist gets, I may push it back, but that is a story for another night. So until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk, and